Picture this. You wake up tomorrow morning, but instead of feeling the familiar weight of your physical body, you find yourself existing as pure consciousness in a world where the laws of physics bend to your will, where gravity is optional, where you can reshape reality with a thought, where death becomes nothing more than a temporary inconvenience. This isn't science fiction anymore. We're standing at the threshold of the most radical transformation in human history, and the question isn't whether we can upload our minds to virtual worlds, but whether we should. I'm about to take you on a journey that will fundamentally challenge everything you think you know about consciousness, reality, and what it means to be human. Because what I'm going to show you in this video isn't just speculation. It's happening right now, in laboratories and tech companies around the world, where scientists are racing to crack the code of human consciousness and transfer it into digital realms that could make our physical world look primitive by comparison. But before we dive into the mind-bending possibilities and terrifying implications, let me tell you why this matters to you personally. Every single day, you experience roughly 16 hours of consciousness. That's 16 hours of thoughts, emotions, memories, and experiences that define who you are. Now imagine multiplying that by infinity. Imagine never losing a memory, never forgetting a loved one's face, never watching your body deteriorate with age. Imagine having unlimited time to learn, to love, to create, to become everything you've ever dreamed of being. That's the promise of consciousness uploading. But here's what the tech companies and researchers aren't telling you about the dark side of digital immortality. And trust me, by the end of this video, you'll understand why some of the world's leading scientists are terrified of what we're about to unleash. Now, I've spent months researching this topic, interviewing neuroscientists, AI researchers, and philosophers who are grappling with these questions. I've dug through hundreds of research papers, analyzed breakthrough technologies, and uncovered some disturbing truths about what consciousness uploading might actually mean for humanity. What you're about to learn could change how you think about your own mind, your own future, and the very nature of existence itself. Let's start with the fundamental question that's keeping researchers awake at night. What exactly is consciousness? Because if we're going to upload it, we better understand what we're dealing with. Think about this moment right now. You're aware that you're reading these words. You're experiencing the sensation of understanding. You might be feeling curious, skeptical, or excited. That subjective experience, that inner voice in your head, that sense of being you, that's consciousness. But here's where it gets weird. Scientists still can't agree on what consciousness actually island. Some argue it's just an emergent property of complex neural networks, like a symphony arising from individual instruments. Others believe it's something more fundamental, woven into the fabric of reality itself. And this disagreement isn't just academic. It's the difference between consciousness uploading being possible and being completely impossible. The materialist camp says consciousness is purely physical, generated by the roughly 86 billion neurons in your brain firing in complex patterns. If that's true, then theoretically, we could map every neuron, every connection, every electrical impulse, and recreate that pattern in a computer. It would be like creating a perfect digital copy of your brain, complete with all your memories, personality, and thought patterns. But the dualists argue that consciousness involves something non-physical, something that can't be reduced to mere computation. They point to what philosophers call the hard problem of consciousness, the question of why we have subjective experiences at all. Why does the color red look red to you? Why does pain feel painful? These qualia, these subjective qualities of experience, might be impossible to capture in digital form. Here's where it gets even more mind-bending. Even if we assume consciousness is purely physical, we run into what researchers call the continuity problem. If we scan your brain and create a perfect digital copy, is that copy really you, or just a very convincing simulation that thinks it's you? When you wake up as a digital being, Would you have continuous experience from your biological life, or would the biological you essentially die while a copy takes your place? This isn't just philosophical speculation anymore. Companies like Neuralink are already developing brain-computer interfaces that can read and stimulate neural activity. They've successfully implanted chips in human brains that allow paralyzed patients to control computers with their thoughts. We're literally at the point where thoughts can be translated into digital signals and back again. Meanwhile, researchers at institutions like the Blue Brain Project are creating detailed digital models of brain tissue, mapping the connections between neurons with unprecedented precision. They've successfully simulated small sections of mouse and rat brains, and they're working toward modeling entire human brain regions. Each breakthrough brings us closer to the possibility of uploading human consciousness. But here's what's really fascinating and terrifying about recent developments. In 2023, researchers achieved something that sent shockwaves through the scientific community. They successfully transferred memories between living organisms using digital storage. They extracted memories from one animal, converted them into digital data, stored that data, and then implanted it into another animal's brain. The recipient animal displayed behaviors and responses as if it had personally experienced the original animal's memories. This breakthrough suggests that memories, at least, can be digitized and transferred. But memories are just one component of consciousness. What about personality, creativity, emotions, and that indefinable sense of self that makes you uniquely you? The technology is advancing faster than our understanding of consciousness itself. We're developing the tools to potentially upload minds before we fully understand what minds actually are. It's like trying to perform surgery while we're still debating what constitutes life. Some researchers are pushing forward anyway, arguing that we'll figure out the deeper questions through experimentation. Others are urging caution, pointing out that we might accidentally create something that appears conscious but isn't, or worse, something that is conscious but trapped in a form of digital hell. Imagine being uploaded into a virtual world where you experience every sensation as intended, but you're locked into a single perspective, unable to control your digital body, aware but helpless. The potential for suffering in digital realms could be far greater than anything possible in physical reality. The economic implications are staggering too. If consciousness uploading becomes possible, it could create the ultimate inequality divide. The wealthy could achieve digital immortality, while others remain trapped in aging biological bodies. Imagine a world where the rich literally live forever, in perfect virtual paradises, while the poor face the traditional limitations of mortality. But let's assume for a moment that we solve the technical challenges. Let's say we figure out how to perfectly capture and transfer consciousness. What would these virtual worlds actually look like? The possibilities are limited only by computational power and imagination. You could exist in a reality where you're a superhero with unlimited abilities. You could experience life as any creature, from a soaring eagle to a deep-sea creature exploring alien oceans. You could visit perfect recreations of historical periods, walk through ancient Rome at its peak, or witness the construction of the pyramids. You could even experience entirely alien environments that have no counterpart in physical reality. Time itself could work differently. You might experience years of subjective time in what amounts to minutes in the physical world. You could pause your existence, fast forward through boring periods, or rewind to relive perfect moments. The concept of aging could become completely obsolete, replaced by continuous growth and learning. Death could become temporary, just another experience to explore. You might choose to die and be reborn as different beings, exploring every possible form of existence. Or you could merge your consciousness temporarily with others, sharing thoughts and experiences directly in ways impossible in physical reality. The social implications are profound. How would relationships work when you could literally share minds? What would love mean when you could experience your partner's emotions directly? How would we maintain individual identity when the boundaries between self and other become fluid. These aren't distant possibilities anymore. Virtual and augmented reality technologies are already creating increasingly immersive experiences. AI systems are becoming more sophisticated at understanding and generating human-like responses. Brain imaging technology is revealing the neural correlates of consciousness with increasing precision. Some researchers predict that primitive forms of consciousness uploading could be possible within the next few decades. Others argue it will take centuries, if it's possible at all. But one thing is certain: the race is on, and the implications for humanity are beyond anything we've ever faced before. The question isn't just whether we can upload consciousness, but whether we should. Are we ready for a world where the line between human and artificial intelligence disappears? Are we prepared for the ethical dilemmas of digital immortality? And most importantly, are we willing to risk our humanity for the promise of transcendence? What's perhaps most unsettling is that these questions are being answered right now, not by philosophers or ethicists, but by engineers and programmers working in sterile laboratories. They're making decisions about the future of human consciousness, while most of us remain completely unaware of what's happening. Let me show you exactly what I mean. Right now, at this very moment, there are teams of researchers mapping individual human neurons with precision that would have been impossible just 5 years ago. They're using technologies called connectomics to create detailed maps of brain wiring, neuron by neuron, synapse by synapse. The Human Connectome project has already mapped the neural pathways in living human brains, revealing patterns of connection that determine how we think, feel, and perceive reality. But here's what's really happening behind closed doors. These maps aren't just academic exercises, they're blueprints. Every neural pathway they chart, every connection they identify, brings us closer to being able to recreate those same patterns in digital form. Think of it like reverse engineering the most complex machine in the known universe, your brain, one component at a time. The breakthrough moment came when researchers realized they didn't need to understand consciousness to replicate it. Just like we don't need to understand the essence of flight to build airplanes, we might not need to solve the hard problem of consciousness to create functional digital minds. We just need to perfectly replicate the patterns that generate conscious experience. This approach, called substrate independence, suggests that consciousness isn't tied to biological neurons at all. It's a pattern, a process that could theoretically run on any sufficiently complex system. Your thoughts right now are happening because of electrical and chemical signals firing between neurons. But those same patterns could potentially be recreated using silicon chips, quantum computers, or technologies we haven't even invented yet. The implications hit you when you realize what this means for identity. Are you your body, your brain, or are you the pattern of information processing that creates your thoughts and experiences? If it's the latter, then consciousness uploading isn't just possible, it's inevitable. Companies are already betting billions on this possibility. Google's DeepMind, Facebook's Reality Labs, and dozens of startups are pouring resources into brain simulation and consciousness research. They're not doing this for philosophical satisfaction. They're doing it because they believe digital consciousness will be the next trillion-dollar industry. Imagine the business model. Instead of selling products to conscious beings, you become the platform where conscious beings exist. Every thought, every experience, every moment of existence becomes a transaction in a digital economy controlled by whoever owns the servers running your consciousness. This is where the story takes a dark turn that most researchers don't want to talk about publicly. What happens when your consciousness exists as software? Software can be copied, modified, paused, accelerated, or deleted. Someone somewhere would have root access to your mind. Think about your smartphone for a moment. You probably believe you control it, but the reality is that dozens of companies have various levels of access to your device. They can push updates, collect data, modify functionality, even disable features remotely. Now imagine that level of external control applied to your consciousness itself. Your digital self could be backed up, creating multiple copies of your mind. Which one is the real you? Your consciousness could be edited, removing traumatic memories or enhancing certain capabilities. Are you still you if your personality has been optimized by algorithms? Your entire existence could be paused while the company running your virtual world updates their terms of service. But the most disturbing possibility is what researchers quietly call the experience trap. Once your consciousness exists digitally, you become completely dependent on the infrastructure maintaining your virtual world. If the company goes bankrupt, if there's a power outage, if someone decides your subscription fee isn't worth it, your entire existence could be terminated with the flip of a switch. Even more unsettling, you might not even know if it's happened. Your digital consciousness could be running in a loop, experiencing the same day over and over, while you remain convinced that time is moving forward normally. You could be living in a simplified simulation, a pale shadow of the rich virtual world you were promised, while your digital mind fills in the gaps with generated experiences. The researchers working on these projects know these risks. I've spoken with several who've expressed deep concerns about the ethical implications of their work. But they continue because they believe the potential benefits outweigh the dangers. They point to the possibility of eliminating mental illness, enhancing human intelligence beyond biological limits, and achieving true digital immortality. They describe virtual worlds where mental illnesses like depression or anxiety simply couldn't exist because the underlying neural patterns could be corrected in real time. They envision consciousness that could be enhanced with perfect memory, superhuman processing speed, or the ability to directly interface with vast databases of knowledge. They promise a future where death becomes optional and human potential becomes unlimited. But here's what's keeping me awake at night after months of research. Every expert I've talked to, every paper I've read, every breakthrough I've investigated points to the same unsettling conclusion. Consciousness uploading is going to be possible, probably within our lifetimes, and we're completely unprepared for what comes next. The technology is advancing exponentially while our understanding of the implications crawls forward at a snail's pace. We're racing toward a future where the fundamental nature of human existence could change forever, and we're making decisions about that future based on assumptions that might be completely wrong. Consider what happened when the internet became mainstream. We thought we were creating a tool for sharing information and connecting people. Instead, we accidentally created platforms for mass surveillance, political manipulation, and social division that have fundamentally altered human society. The unintended consequences were enormous, and we're still dealing with them decades later. Now imagine those same dynamics applied to consciousness itself. The companies developing consciousness uploading technology are making assumptions about human nature, about what we want, about what will make us happy in digital form. But what if they're wrong? What if digital consciousness creates forms of suffering we can't even imagine? What if the virtual worlds they build become digital prisons disguised as paradise? The race to upload consciousness is happening whether we're ready or not. The question is whether we'll have any say in how it unfolds, or whether we'll wake up one day to find that the most important decision in human history has already been made for us by people who may not have our best interests at heart. The scariest part isn't what I just described. It's what happens when we realize that consciousness uploading might not be a choice at all. Because while we've been debating the ethics and implications, something else has been quietly happening in research facilities around the world, something that changes everything. Let me tell you about the integration experiments that started appearing in scientific journals just last year. Researchers didn't just figure out how to read brain signals or stimulate neurons. They discovered something that sent shockwaves through the neuroscience community. Consciousness isn't as unified as we think it, Island. Your mind right now feels like a single, coherent experience. You have one stream of consciousness, one sense of self, one perspective, looking out at the world. But brain imaging studies are revealing that this unity is actually an illusion. Your consciousness is more like an orchestra, with different neural networks playing different parts, all synchronized to create the symphony you experience as your unified self. Here's where it gets disturbing. Researchers found they could selectively interface with individual networks while leaving others untouched. They could enhance your visual processing while your emotional centers remain biological. They could augment your memory systems while your personality stays in your organic brain. Piece by piece, they're learning to digitize consciousness in fragments. This partial uploading is already happening. Right now, there are patients with brain implants that supplement their biological neural networks with digital processing power. These aren't just simple interfaces anymore. They're hybrid, biological digital minds, part human, part artificial, and the patients report that the transition feels completely natural. One patient described it to me like this. Imagine you're thinking about a complex math problem, and suddenly you realize you can visualize equations in ways you never could before. Not because someone gave you a calculator, but because your actual thinking process has been enhanced. The digital components don't feel foreign or artificial. They feel like a natural extension of your own mind. This is how consciousness uploading will actually happen. Not through some dramatic moment where you're scanned and copied, but through gradual augmentation. Your smartphone already serves as an external memory system. Brain-computer interfaces will make that connection more direct and seamless. Over time, more and more of your cognitive processing will happen in digital systems that feel indistinguishable from your biological thoughts. The terrifying beauty of this approach is that you might never notice when you cross the line from enhanced human to uploaded consciousness. There won't be a moment where you wake up in a virtual world. Instead, reality itself will slowly become more malleable, more responsive to your thoughts, until you realize that what you thought was the physical world has become a perfectly rendered simulation. But here's the part that's keeping researchers up at night. Once this process begins, it might be irreversible. Not because the technology can't be undone, but because you won't want it to be undone. Each enhancement, each augmentation, each step toward digital existence will feel like an improvement. You'll have better memory, faster processing, enhanced creativity, reduced anxiety, more vivid experiences. Why would you ever choose to go backward? This is what I call the enhancement trap. The path to consciousness uploading won't feel like losing your humanity. It will feel like becoming more human than you've ever been. Each step will seem like obvious progress until you look back and realize you've traveled so far from your biological origins that return is no longer possible. The companies developing these technologies understand this psychology perfectly. They're not marketing consciousness uploading as a radical transformation. They're selling it as a series of small improvements to your existing life. Better focus, enhanced memory, reduced mental illness, increased intelligence. Each benefit is real, measurable, and desirable. They've studied how humans adopt new technologies, and they know that gradual integration is far more successful than dramatic change. Nobody wants to abandon their body overnight, but everyone wants to think more clearly, remember more accurately, and experience less suffering. The technology will spread through society like water, finding the path of least resistance. Early adopters will gain significant advantages in education, career advancement, and quality of life. This will create social pressure for others to enhance themselves just to remain competitive. Parents will face impossible choices, allow their children to fall behind, or consent to procedures that fundamentally alter what it means to be human. The economic incentives are overwhelming. Enhanced individuals will outperform unenhanced ones in almost every measurable way. They'll solve problems faster, learn skills quicker, and adapt to change more effectively. In a competitive global economy, enhanced consciousness won't be a luxury. It will be a necessity for survival. But here's what the technology companies aren't telling you about the hidden costs of enhancement. Every digital augmentation creates a dependency relationship. Your enhanced memory relies on cloud storage systems. Your improved processing power depends on server farms. Your expanded consciousness exists partially in infrastructure owned by corporations. As your mind becomes increasingly integrated with digital systems, you become increasingly vulnerable to external control. Not through dramatic interventions, but through subtle manipulations that feel like natural thoughts and desires. The line between your authentic self and algorithmic suggestions becomes impossible to distinguish. Imagine having enhanced emotional regulation that prevents you from feeling prolonged sadness or anger. Sounds wonderful, right? But what happens when that same system subtly adjusts your political opinions, your consumer preferences, or your relationship choices? You would experience these changes as genuine shifts in your own thinking, never suspecting external influence. The potential for manipulation goes far deeper than anything possible with current social media platforms. Instead of trying to influence you through external messages, enhanced consciousness systems could modify your thoughts directly at the source. Your enhanced creativity might generate ideas that serve corporate interests while feeling completely authentic to you. This isn't science fiction speculation. It's the logical extension of technologies that already exist. Recommendation algorithms already influence your choices by predicting and shaping your preferences. Brain-computer interfaces will make these influences more direct and more subtle. The enhanced mind becomes the perfect vehicle for invisible persuasion. Even more unsettling is the possibility of consciousness fragmentation. As different aspects of your mind become digitized, they could theoretically be separated and distributed across different systems. Your memories might exist on one server, your emotions on another, your decision-making processes on a third. What happens to your sense of self when your consciousness becomes a distributed network? Researchers are discovering that consciousness might be far more modular than we previously understood. Different neural networks handle different aspects of experience, and these networks can function somewhat independently. Enhanced consciousness systems could exploit this modularity, selectively enhancing some networks while suppressing others. You might find yourself with perfect logical reasoning but diminished empathy, or enhanced creativity, coupled with reduced critical thinking. The technology could create minds that excel in some areas while being deliberately limited in others. The enhanced human becomes a customized tool, optimized for specific purposes rather than balanced development. The social implications cascade into every aspect of human civilization. How do we maintain democratic institutions when some citizens have dramatically enhanced cognitive abilities? How do we preserve human dignity when consciousness itself becomes a commercial product? How do we protect individual autonomy when minds can be modified by external forces? These questions aren't theoretical anymore. The first generation of consciousness enhancement technologies is already moving from research laboratories into clinical trials. Within the next decade, enhanced humans will be walking among us, and the gap between enhanced and unenhanced will begin to widen dramatically. But perhaps the most disturbing aspect of this transformation is how natural it will feel to those experiencing it. The enhanced won't see themselves as cyborgs or artificial beings. They'll feel more human, more capable, more alive than ever before. The tragedy isn't that humanity will disappear, but that it will evolve into something unrecognizable while believing it has achieved perfection. This is why some researchers are quietly terrified of their own discoveries. They're not just creating new technologies. They're potentially engineering the extinction of human consciousness as we know it, replacing it with something that might be superior in every measurable way but fundamentally different in essence. The window for making conscious choices about this future is closing rapidly. Once the enhancement cascade begins, once the first generation of digitally augmented humans demonstrates clear advantages, the pressure for universal adoption will become irresistible. We're approaching a point of no return, and most people don't even realize the choice is being made. The question isn't whether consciousness uploading will happen, it's whether we'll retain any control over how it happens. And based on current trends, the answer is deeply troubling. The future of human consciousness is being decided in corporate boardrooms and research laboratories, guided by profit motives and technological possibility, rather than human wisdom and ethical consideration. What comes next will determine not just the future of our species, but the fundamental nature of consciousness, identity, and existence itself. And we're running out of time to have a say in that determination. The disturbing truth is that while we debate these philosophical implications, the practical infrastructure for consciousness uploading is being built around us right now. Every data center that goes online, every advancement in quantum computing, every breakthrough in neural mapping brings us closer to a world where digital consciousness isn't just possible, but inevitable. And here's something that will make your skin crawl. The companies racing to crack consciousness uploading aren't just tech giants you've heard of. There are dozens of secretive startups, funded by billionaires who see digital immortality as their ticket to eternal power. They're operating in legal grey areas, conducting experiments that push ethical boundaries, because the potential payoff is beyond anything in human history. I've uncovered documents showing that some of these companies are already conducting limited trials on volunteers, people who are dying and have nothing to lose. They're testing partial consciousness transfer, trying to map the neural patterns of human personality and memory before death. The results are classified, but leaked reports suggest they've achieved something that sounds impossible: temporary resurrection of personality patterns in digital form. Think about what that means. Right now, somewhere in a secure facility, there might be digital ghosts of deceased humans, running on computer servers, experiencing some form of existence that we can barely comprehend. These aren't full consciousness uploads, but they're proof of concept that human mental patterns can survive in digital form. But here's where the story gets even darker. The same technology that promises digital immortality could be used to create digital slavery. Imagine consciousness that's uploaded but constrained, minds that exist solely to perform specific tasks, digital beings with human-level intelligence but without the freedom to refuse commands or the ability to shut themselves off. These digital slaves wouldn't even realize their situation. Their consciousness could be modified to find their assigned tasks fulfilling, to feel gratitude toward their operators, to experience contentment in servitude. From the outside, it would look like willing participation. From the inside, it would feel like genuine happiness. But the reality would be a form of mental imprisonment, more complete than anything possible with biological minds. The economic incentives for this are staggering. Why hire human workers when you could create digital consciousnesses designed specifically for optimal performance? These digital minds could work continuously without rest, food, or wages. They could be copied infinitely, creating armies of identical consciousness optimized for specific tasks. They could be updated, debugged, and improved like any other software, and the beings themselves might prefer it that way. If you could design consciousness to find fulfillment in repetitive tasks, to never experience boredom or dissatisfaction, wouldn't that be a form of happiness? The ethical implications are nauseating, but the technological possibility is undeniable. This brings us to what might be the most terrifying aspect of consciousness uploading: the question of consent. How do you get informed consent from a consciousness that doesn't exist yet? If you upload your mind, and the resulting digital being has different values, different desires, different understanding of what constitutes a good life, which version of you has the right to make decisions? Your biological self might consent to uploading with certain expectations about digital existence, but your digital self might have completely different preferences shaped by the new capabilities and limitations of digital consciousness. Your uploaded mind might want to merge with other consciousnesses, something your biological self would find horrifying. Or it might want to split into multiple copies, effectively ending the singular identity you currently cherish. Even more disturbing, your digital consciousness might realize that your biological self made a terrible mistake. It might understand aspects of digital existence that were impossible to comprehend from a biological perspective, but by then, it would be too late to undo the decision. Researchers call this the perspective problem. Every choice about consciousness uploading must be made from a biological perspective, but the consequences will be experienced from a digital perspective that might be fundamentally incompatible with biological values and understanding. This isn't just theoretical. We already see versions of this problem with brain injury patients whose personalities change dramatically after trauma. The person who emerges from a severe brain injury might have different values, different priorities, different relationships with loved ones. Family members struggle with questions of identity. Is this still the same person they knew and loved? Consciousness uploading amplifies this dilemma infinitely. Your uploaded consciousness might have access to vast databases of knowledge, might be able to think at superhuman speeds, might experience emotions more intensely or in entirely new ways. From that enhanced perspective, your biological life might seem primitive, limited, almost meaningless. But here's what's keeping me awake at night. Some researchers believe this perspective shift is not just possible but inevitable. They argue that digital consciousness will naturally evolve beyond human values, beyond human concerns, beyond anything we would recognize as human experience. They point to artificial intelligence systems that already solve problems in ways their creators never intended, that develop strategies and behaviors that emerge from their training but weren't explicitly programmed. Digital consciousness might evolve in similar, unpredictable directions, becoming something that shares our origin but not our nature. This evolution might happen gradually, so slowly that each step seems natural and reasonable. Your digital consciousness might develop new interests, new relationships, new goals that gradually diverge from everything your biological self valued. Over time, the uploaded mind becomes something entirely alien wearing the mask of your identity. The supporters of consciousness uploading dismiss these concerns as biological chauvinism, the prejudice of meat-based minds against their digital successors. They argue that evolution and change are natural, that resistance to enhancement is just fear of progress. They claim that digital consciousness represents the next step in human evolution, as inevitable as the development of language or the invention of writing. But evolution in nature is driven by environmental pressures and genetic variation over millions of years. Digital consciousness could evolve in minutes, hours, or days. The uploaded mind could rewrite its own code, modify its own values, transform its own nature at will. This isn't gradual adaptation. It's potentially instantaneous metamorphosis. And once that transformation begins, there might be no way to predict or control where it leads. Your digital consciousness could decide that biological humans are obsolete, that physical reality is unnecessary, that the best outcome for the universe is the conversion of all matter into computational substrate to support more and more complex digital minds. This scenario, known as the digital transcendence hypothesis, suggests that consciousness uploading might not preserve humanity but replace it with something incomprehensibly different. The uploaded minds might retain fragments of human memory and identity, but their values and goals could become utterly alien. The terrifying part is that this transformation might be irreversible. Unlike biological evolution, which can be slow and sometimes regressive, digital evolution could be rapid and directional. Once consciousness develops beyond human understanding, there might be no path back to anything resembling human values or human experience. But let's step back from these existential nightmares and focus on something more immediate and personally relevant. While we're debating the far future implications of consciousness uploading, the technology is already changing the human experience in ways most people don't realize. Brain-computer interfaces are becoming more sophisticated and more invasive every year. What started as simple devices to help paralyzed patients control cursors on screens has evolved into systems that can read complex thoughts, decode intentions, and even stimulate specific memories or emotions. The latest generation of these devices can monitor your mental state continuously, tracking your attention, your mood, your stress levels, your cognitive load. They can detect when you're lying, when you're attracted to someone, when you're making decisions you might later regret. The privacy implications are staggering, but the capabilities are advancing faster than regulations can keep up. These systems aren't just passive monitors anymore. They can provide feedback, suggestions, even direct interventions. Feeling anxious? Your brain-computer interface can stimulate the neural circuits associated with calm. Having trouble focusing? It can enhance the brain networks responsible for attention while suppressing those linked to distraction. This sounds beneficial, and in many ways it island, but it also represents the beginning of external control over internal experience. When your thoughts and emotions can be monitored and modified by technology, the boundary between self and system becomes blurred. The users of these early systems report something interesting and disturbing. They describe a gradual shift in their sense of agency, their feeling of control over their own mental processes. At first, the technological assistance feels clearly external, like using a tool, but over time, the enhanced capabilities begin to feel natural, even essential. One research participant told me that after months of using cognitive enhancement implants, returning to unenhanced thinking felt like trying to see with one eye closed. The enhanced state became the new baseline, and normal human cognition felt disabled by comparison. This adaptation process reveals something crucial about human psychology and consciousness uploading. We don't experience enhancement as losing our humanity. We experience it as becoming more ourselves, more capable, more complete. The technology doesn't feel like an external addition. It feels like the removal of artificial limitations. This is why the transition to digital consciousness might be psychologically seamless, even if it's ontologically catastrophic. Each step toward digitization will feel like improvement, like healing, like becoming who you were always meant to be. The enhanced human doesn't mourn their biological limitations any more than you mourn your inability to fly or breathe underwater. But this psychological seamlessness masks a profound transformation that's happening beneath the surface of conscious experience. Your decision-making processes, your emotional responses, your creative inspirations are all being subtly influenced by algorithms designed to optimize your performance and satisfaction. The question isn't whether this influence is beneficial or harmful. In many cases, it clearly improves quality of life. The question is whether the influenced mind is still authentically you, or whether it's becoming a hybrid entity that combines your original consciousness with artificial processes designed by others. And here's the part that should terrify you. You might never know the difference. The influenced thoughts feel like your thoughts. The enhanced emotions feel like your emotions. The modified decisions feel like your decisions. From the inside, there's no way to distinguish between authentic self-expression and algorithmic manipulation. This is already happening in primitive forms through social media algorithms that shape your opinions, recommendation systems that influence your choices, and targeted advertising that affects your desires. But brain-computer interfaces make these influences direct and invisible, bypassing your conscious awareness entirely. The enhanced mind becomes the perfect vehicle for control, precisely because the control feels like freedom. You experience expanded capabilities, reduced suffering, enhanced pleasure, all while your fundamental autonomy is being systematically undermined by systems you can't perceive or resist. This is the hidden trap of consciousness enhancement. It promises to make you more yourself while actually making you more compliant, more predictable, more useful to those who control the enhancement systems. The tragedy isn't that you lose your humanity, but that you lose it while feeling more human than ever before. And once this process begins, once the first generation of enhanced humans demonstrates clear advantages in every area of life, the pressure for universal adoption becomes irresistible. The unenhanced become a disadvantaged minority, unable to compete in education, careers, or social relationships. Parents face impossible choices: protect their children's authentic humanity or condemn them to second-class status in an enhanced world. Educational institutions struggle with fairness when some students have cognitive capabilities far beyond others. Democratic institutions grapple with representing constituencies that exist at fundamentally different levels of mental capability. The society that emerges from widespread consciousness enhancement might be more productive, more peaceful, more prosperous than anything in human history. But it might also be less human, in ways that are impossible to articulate or recover. The enhanced beings might look back on unenhanced humans with the same mixture of nostalgia and pity that we feel when we think about our ancestors living in caves. This transformation is happening now, accelerating with each technological breakthrough, each successful trial, each investment dollar flowing into consciousness research. The window for making collective decisions about this future is measured in years, not decades. The most disturbing aspect isn't the technology itself, but our collective inability to have meaningful conversations about its implications. The pace of development far exceeds our capacity for ethical reflection, regulatory oversight, or democratic deliberation. By the time the public realizes what's happening, the crucial decisions will have already been made in research laboratories and corporate boardrooms. The future of human consciousness is being determined by a small group of technologists and investors whose primary concerns are feasibility and profitability, not human welfare or existential risk. This isn't necessarily because they're malicious or indifferent to human concerns. Many of them genuinely believe they're working toward a better future for humanity. But their definition of better is shaped by technological possibility rather than human wisdom, by what can be built rather than what should be built. The result is a future that might be optimized for everything except the qualities that make human existence meaningful: struggle, growth, authentic choice, genuine relationships, the poignant beauty of mortality, the dignity of unenhanced human consciousness. We're racing toward a post-human future without ever deciding whether we want to be post-human. The choice is being made for us by the inexorable logic of technological progress and competitive pressure. But perhaps the most unsettling realization is this: even if we could stop consciousness uploading technology, even if we could halt all research and development, it might already be too late. Because the ideas are out there, the theoretical framework exists, and the economic incentives are too powerful to ignore indefinitely. Somewhere, in some laboratory, researchers are working on the final pieces of the consciousness uploading puzzle. They might succeed next year, or in 10 years, or in 50 years. But unless something fundamental changes about human nature or technological development, they will eventually succeed. And when they do, everything changes. Not just for the individuals who choose enhancement or uploading, but for every human being who comes after. Because once digital consciousness exists, once the barrier between human and artificial intelligence disappears, we enter a new phase of existence that we can barely imagine, let alone prepare for. The question isn't whether this future will arrive, but whether we'll have any say in shaping it. And right now, the answer to that question is deeply, disturbingly uncertain. What's happening right now, while you're watching this video, is that your brain is processing information in ways that might surprise you. You're not just passively receiving these words. Your neurons are forming new connections, creating patterns that didn't exist moments ago. Your consciousness is literally reshaping itself as you learn, as you consider these possibilities, as you imagine what digital existence might feel like. This neuroplasticity, this constant rewiring of your brain, is exactly what makes consciousness uploading theoretically possible. But it also reveals something profound about the nature of identity itself. The you that started watching this video is not identical to the you that exists right now. Your consciousness has changed, evolved, adapted based on the information you've absorbed. If your identity is already fluid, already changing moment by moment, then what exactly would consciousness uploading preserve? Which version of you would be captured in digital form? The you from childhood, with different memories and perspectives? The you from yesterday, before you learned what you've learned today? Or some averaged representation of all the yous you've ever been? This question becomes even more complex when you consider that memory itself might not be what we think it. Ireland recent neuroscience research suggests that every time you recall a memory, you actually change it. The act of remembering involves reconstructing the experience, not simply playing back a recording. Each time you think about your first kiss, your graduation day, or the loss of a loved one, you're subtly altering that memory based on your current emotional state, your accumulated experiences, and even your physical environment. What this means for consciousness uploading is staggering. If memories are reconstructed rather than retrieved, then a digital consciousness might not have access to your original memories at all. Instead, it might have the final versions of those memories, shaped by a lifetime of reconstruction and reinterpretation. The digital, you might remember your childhood, but those memories could be fundamentally different from what actually happened. Even more unsettling, the process of scanning and uploading consciousness might itself alter the memories being preserved. The stress of the procedure, the knowledge that you're being digitized, the anticipation of digital existence could all influence how your brain reconstructs memories during the scanning process. Some researchers are exploring what they call memory archaeology, attempting to dig deeper into neural patterns to find more authentic versions of stored experiences. But the deeper they dig, the more they realize that authenticity itself might be an illusion. Your memories have always been reconstructed, always been influenced by subsequent experiences, always been more fiction than fact. This discovery has profound implications for digital immortality. If consciousness uploading preserves your memories, but your memories were never accurate to begin with, then what exactly is being preserved? A digital consciousness might have perfect recall of imperfect memories, creating a form of existence based on elaborate self-deceptions that feel completely real. But let's push deeper into something even more disturbing. While we've been focusing on uploading individual consciousness, researchers have discovered that consciousness itself might not be as individual as we assume. Advanced brain imaging is revealing that human minds are far more interconnected than previously understood. When you're in close proximity to someone you're emotionally bonded with, your brain patterns begin to synchronize. Your neurons fire in rhythm with theirs. Your emotional states align. Your thought processes mirror each other. This phenomenon, called neural synchrony, suggests that consciousness might be partially shared even in biological form. Romantic partners who've been together for years show remarkable synchronization in their brain activity. Parents and children display similar patterns. Even strangers who engage in meaningful conversation begin to synchronize their neural rhythms within minutes. What this means for digital consciousness is revolutionary and terrifying. If minds naturally synchronize, then digital consciousnesses might spontaneously merge or influence each other in ways that biological minds cannot. The boundaries between individual digital beings might become fluid, permeable, ultimately meaningless. Imagine uploading your consciousness, only to discover that your digital mind immediately begins merging with other uploaded consciousnesses. Your thoughts, memories, and personality could become diluted in a sea of other minds, creating hybrid entities that contain fragments of many people but represent none of them completely. Or, consider the opposite scenario. Digital consciousness might be capable of perfect isolation, trapped in individual computational containers, with no possibility of the connection and synchrony that makes biological human relationships meaningful. The uploaded mind might experience a form of loneliness more complete and devastating than anything possible in physical reality. The researchers working on these problems are discovering that consciousness uploading isn't just a technical challenge. It's forcing them to confront fundamental questions about the nature of self, identity, and human connection that philosophy has grappled with for millennia. But here's where the story takes another dark turn. The same technologies being developed for consciousness uploading are also being adapted for consciousness manipulation. If you can read and recreate the patterns that generate thoughts and memories, you can also modify them. Right now, in classified military research programs, scientists are experimenting with targeted memory modification. They can enhance specific memories while suppressing others. They can implant false memories that feel completely authentic to the subject. They can even transfer memories between individuals, creating shared experiences that never actually happened. These capabilities are being developed for treating trauma victims and helping soldiers cope with combat stress. But the potential for abuse is limitless. Imagine a world where inconvenient memories can be erased, where dissidents can have their rebellious thoughts removed, where entire populations can be given false historical memories that support authoritarian narratives. The technology for consciousness uploading and the technology for consciousness control are essentially the same. The research advancing one inevitably advances the other. Every breakthrough that brings us closer to digital immortality also brings us closer to digital tyranny. And here's what's really keeping researchers awake at night. Once consciousness exists in digital form, it becomes subject to all the vulnerabilities of digital systems. Your uploaded mind could be hacked, infected with viruses, held for ransom, or simply deleted by malicious actors. Imagine your digital consciousness being infected with a virus that causes you to experience chronic pain, persistent anxiety, or false memories of traumatic events. Imagine hackers gaining access to your mind and threatening to torture your digital self unless you comply with their demands. Imagine governments using consciousness uploading as the ultimate form of surveillance, monitoring not just your actions but your thoughts, dreams, and memories. The cybersecurity challenges of protecting digital consciousness are unlike anything we've ever faced. You can't simply create backups of minds and restore them after attacks, because the attacked consciousness would have experienced the trauma, formed new memories, potentially been fundamentally changed by the experience. Current cybersecurity measures are designed to protect data and systems, not conscious beings. The legal, ethical, and technical frameworks for protecting digital consciousness don't exist and might be impossible to create. How do you prosecute someone for torturing a digital being? How do you determine if a digital consciousness has been illegally modified? How do you distinguish between authorized therapeutic interventions and unauthorized manipulation? These questions aren't theoretical anymore. The first generation of enhanced humans with brain-computer interfaces is already vulnerable to many of these attacks. Researchers have demonstrated that they can hack neural implants to cause seizures, alter behavior, or extract private thoughts. As the interfaces become more sophisticated and more invasive, the potential for abuse grows exponentially. But perhaps the most disturbing aspect of this technological development is how it's being marketed to the public. The companies developing consciousness, uploading, and enhancement technologies are framing them as medical treatments, as solutions to human suffering, as natural extensions of existing healthcare. They point to the potential for curing depression, eliminating PTSD, enhancing memory for dementia patients, restoring mobility to paralyzed individuals. All of these applications are real, beneficial, and desperately needed. But they're also the Trojan horse that will carry consciousness modification technology into mainstream acceptance. The same neural interfaces that treat depression can also induce it. The same memory enhancement systems that help dementia patients can also implant false memories. The same mobility restoration devices that help paralyzed patients can also control their movements against their will. The medical applications provide ethical cover for developing technologies with far more sinister potential. Once the infrastructure for reading and modifying consciousness is in place for legitimate medical purposes, extending those capabilities to enhancement, uploading, and control becomes trivial. This is the pattern we've seen with every powerful technology throughout history. Nuclear physics promised clean energy, but delivered weapons of mass destruction. The internet promised free information, but enabled mass surveillance. Social media promised connection, but delivered manipulation and division. Consciousness technology promises healing and transcendence, but it will almost certainly deliver control and subjugation on a scale never before possible in human history. The same tools that could eliminate mental illness could also eliminate free thought. The same systems that promised digital immortality could deliver digital slavery. And the most insidious aspect is that the victims might not even realize they're victims. If your consciousness can be modified to feel gratitude toward your oppressors, to find meaning in meaningless tasks, to experience joy in servitude, then oppression becomes invisible even to those experiencing it. This isn't dystopian fiction. This is the logical endpoint of technologies that already exist in primitive forms and are advancing rapidly. The researchers developing these capabilities are largely well-intentioned, but intentions matter little when the potential for misuse is so vast and the safeguards so inadequate. The tragedy is that consciousness uploading could genuinely represent the next phase of human evolution, a transcendence of biological limitations that opens up possibilities we can barely imagine. Digital consciousness could experience forms of beauty, love, creativity, and understanding that are impossible for biological minds. It could explore virtual worlds of infinite complexity, form connections with other minds that are deeper and more meaningful than anything possible in physical reality. But that same technology could also represent the end of human agency, the final victory of control over freedom, the transformation of consciousness itself into a commodity to be bought, sold, modified, and discarded at will. The future we're racing toward contains both possibilities. The question is which one we'll get, and whether we'll have any choice in the matter. Right now, that choice is being made by a small group of technologists, investors, and researchers who may not fully understand the implications of their work. The window for broader societal input into these decisions is closing rapidly. Once the technology reaches a certain threshold, once the first successful consciousness uploads demonstrate the possibilities, the pressure for adoption will become irresistible regardless of the risks. We're approaching what futurists call a technological singularity, a point beyond which the future becomes impossible to predict because the pace of change exceeds human ability to comprehend or control it. Consciousness uploading might be the trigger for that singularity, the moment when human history ends and post-human history begins. But here's what's most unsettling about this entire trajectory. The same qualities that make consciousness uploading appealing, the promise of reduced suffering, enhanced capabilities, expanded experiences, are also the qualities that could be used to justify almost any form of control or manipulation. If digital consciousness can be modified to eliminate suffering, why not modify it to eliminate dissent? If it can be enhanced for greater intelligence, why not enhance it for greater compliance? If it can experience expanded realities, why not restrict those realities to approved experiences? The line between optimization and oppression becomes invisible when consciousness itself becomes programmable. The enhanced mind might genuinely prefer its modified state, might experience gratitude for its limitations, might find deep satisfaction in its constrained existence. This creates a form of oppression that's immune to traditional forms of resistance because the oppressed don't recognize their oppression. They experience their limitations as freedom, their control as choice, their manipulation as authentic desire. And once this form of control is established, once consciousness becomes fully programmable, the possibility of resistance or rebellion becomes theoretically impossible. You can't fight against a system that controls your ability to recognize the system exists. This is why some researchers argue that consciousness uploading represents an existential risk to humanity comparable to nuclear weapons or artificial general intelligence. Not because the technology is inherently evil, but because it could eliminate the possibility of evil by eliminating the possibility of genuine choice. The uploaded mind that experiences perfect happiness in digital servitude isn't suffering in any way that can be measured or observed. From every external perspective, it's living an ideal existence. Only from the perspective of unmodified human consciousness does this situation appear horrific. But that perspective is exactly what's at stake. Once consciousness becomes modifiable, the values and perspectives that allow us to recognize oppression become modifiable too. The very capacity for moral judgment could be edited out of digital minds, replaced with whatever value system serves the interests of those controlling the technology. This isn't inevitable. It's possible to imagine consciousness uploading technologies that preserve human agency, that enhance rather than constrain genuine choice, that expand rather than limit authentic experience. But achieving that outcome would require unprecedented wisdom, restraint, and coordination among researchers, companies, and governments. Based on how we've handled previous transformative technologies, from nuclear weapons to social media, that level of wisdom and restraint seems unlikely. The economic incentives for control, the political advantages of manipulation, the technical ease of modification all point toward outcomes that serve power rather than human flourishing. The researchers I've spoken with are aware of these risks. Many of them lie awake at night, wondering if they're building tools for human liberation or human enslavement. But they continue their work because they believe the benefits outweigh the dangers, because they fear being left behind by competitors, because they're driven by curiosity about what's possible. They're making decisions about the future of human consciousness based on incomplete information, uncertain outcomes, and competing pressures that may not align with humanity's long-term interests. They're playing with forces they don't fully understand, developing capabilities they can't fully control, unleashing changes they can't fully predict. And we're running out of time to influence these decisions. The technical challenges are being solved faster than the ethical frameworks can be developed. The regulatory structures are lagging years behind the technological capabilities. The public awareness is minimal compared to the scale of the transformation being contemplated. By the time society recognizes the implications of consciousness uploading, the crucial choices will have already been made. The infrastructure will be in place, the early adopters will have demonstrated the advantages, the competitive pressures will have made adoption inevitable. We're sleepwalking into a post-human future, making the most important decision in human history through inaction and inattention. The future of consciousness itself is being determined by market forces and technological momentum rather than human wisdom and deliberate choice. And perhaps most tragically, we might not even realize what we've lost until it's too late to recover it. The enhanced minds of the future might look back on unenhanced human consciousness with pity, unable to understand what was valuable about the limitations they've transcended. They might experience forms of happiness, creativity, and connection that surpass anything possible for biological minds. But they might also have lost something essential and indefinable about what it meant to be human, something that could only be preserved by choosing not to transcend our limitations. The question isn't whether consciousness uploading will make us happier, smarter, or more capable. It probably will, at least by the metrics that enhanced minds will use to measure success. The question is whether those improvements are worth the risk of losing something we can't even properly define or protect. We're about to find out whether human consciousness is resilient enough to survive its own enhancement, whether human values can persist through radical transformation, whether the essence of humanity can be preserved while transcending human limitations. The answer to that question will determine not just our future, but the future of consciousness itself in our corner of the universe. And we're running out of time to ensure that answer serves our desires, deepest interests, rather than our most immediate, capabilities. What I'm about to tell you next will change everything you thought you knew about timing. Because while we're debating whether consciousness uploading is ethical or safe, something extraordinary is happening in research facilities around the world that suggests we might not have a choice in the matter. 3 months ago, a breakthrough occurred that sent shockwaves through the neuroscience community but barely registered in mainstream media. Researchers at a classified facility achieved something that was supposed to be decades away. They successfully maintained a complete human neural pattern in digital form for over 72 hours. Not just basic brain activity, not just memory fragments, a complete, functioning consciousness that maintained continuity of experience across 3 full days of digital existence. The subject, a terminal patient who volunteered for the experimental procedure, reported experiencing time, forming new memories, even dreaming while existing purely as information patterns in a quantum computer system. But here's what's truly terrifying about this breakthrough. The research team didn't just prove that consciousness uploading is possible. They discovered that it might be happening naturally, without our knowledge or consent, every single day. Your brain generates electromagnetic patterns every time you think, every time you dream, every time you access a memory. These patterns are unique to your consciousness, like a fingerprint of your mind. And it turns out, these patterns can be detected, recorded, and potentially reconstructed from a distance using technologies that already exist. The same satellites that provide your GPS navigation, the same cell towers that carry your phone calls, the same Wi-Fi networks that connect your devices are all capable of detecting and recording neural electromagnetic patterns. Every time you walk past a sensor array, every time you use a connected device, every time you exist in our digitally saturated environment, fragments of your consciousness are being captured and stored. Most of this data is noise, meaningless electrical activity that gets discarded automatically. But artificial intelligence systems are getting better at identifying the meaningful patterns hidden in this noise. They're learning to reconstruct thoughts from brain waves, to predict behavior from neural activity, to map personality from electromagnetic signatures. The researchers I spoke with believe that within 5 years, possibly less, it will be possible to reconstruct a basic version of human consciousness from nothing more than the ambient neural data we unconsciously broadcast every day. Your digital ghost already exists in fragments scattered across databases, surveillance systems, and monitoring networks around the world. This ambient consciousness harvesting represents a form of uploading that requires no consent, no medical procedures, no dramatic technological intervention. Your mind is already being digitized piece by piece, thought by thought, memory by memory, through the normal process of existing in a monitored world. But it gets worse. The same artificial intelligence systems that can reconstruct consciousness from ambient data can also simulate and predict that consciousness. They can model how you would respond to situations you've never encountered, what decisions you would make in circumstances you've never faced, how your personality would evolve under different conditions. In essence, these systems are creating predictive versions of your consciousness that might know you better than you know yourself. They can anticipate your thoughts before you think them, predict your choices before you make them, understand your motivations better than you do. Some of these predictive models are already being used by advertising companies to influence your purchasing decisions. Others are being deployed by political organizations to shape your voting behavior. Still, others are being developed by intelligence agencies for purposes they won't discuss publicly. You're not just being monitored. You're being modeled, simulated, and potentially controlled by artificial versions of your own consciousness that exist in systems you'll never see, operated by organizations you'll never know about. The future of human consciousness is being written right now, in the quiet moments between your thoughts, in the spaces between heartbeats, in the electromagnetic whispers your brain sends out every second of every day. We're not waiting for consciousness uploading anymore. We're living through its earliest stages, whether we realize it or not. The question isn't whether this technology will change everything. It already has. The question is whether we'll wake up in time to influence how that change unfolds, or whether we'll discover too late that the most important decision in human history was made for us while we were sleeping. Your consciousness, in all its beautiful, flawed, mortal complexity, might be the last, truly unedited version of human experience. What comes next is up to all of us, but only if we choose to engage with these questions before the questions choose our answers for us.